A field of roaring engines, canvas wings shaking in the wind, white men in leather caps and goggles strutting to their planes like gods. It's the 1920s, the age of the aviator. The sky is a new frontier, open, dangerous, limitless. But not for everyone. Because for one woman, the sky was locked. Locked by race, locked by gender, locked by a system that told her, stay on the ground. Her name was Bessie Coleman, the daughter of sharecroppers, a woman who painted nails for a living, a woman whose very dream was considered a joke. She wanted to fly, but no American flight school would even let her through the door, not one. So she did the impossible. She crossed an ocean. She learned a foreign language just to beg for the chance to climb into a cockpit. And when she did, when she finally touched the sky, the world gasped. Because this wasn't just about flying. It was about defiance. It was about rewriting who had the right to claim the heavens. But here's the mystery. If she was the first, if she broke through when no one else dared, why don't we know her name today? The answer is chilling. Because the same system that kept her on the ground, the same forces that told her she didn't belong, would stop at nothing to erase her from history. Imagine living in a world where every door is locked, not because you lack the key, but because of who you are. This was America in the early 1900s. The law was Jim Crow, segregated schools, segregated buses, segregated lunch counters. Even the sky, though empty and endless, was segregated by silence. If you were black, you were told, know your place. If you were a woman, you were told, don't even dream of flying. And if you were both, the world laughed at the very thought. The Wright brothers had already carved their names into history. Daring young white men lined up to chase glory in the air. Newspapers hailed them as heroes, as pioneers. But for women, the cockpit was forbidden. For African Americans, the very idea was absurd. Picture it. Standing in the dust of a Texas cotton field, looking up at the vast blue horizon, hearing the hum of an engine as a plane streaks across the clouds, and knowing, deep in your bones, you will never be allowed in that seat. That was the cage, a cage built from laws, prejudice, and fear. But cages do strange things. They crush some, and they ignite others. And in this America, where a black person couldn't even try on a hat in a store, where women were told their place was in the kitchen, not the sky, one woman began to whisper to herself, why not me? Her name was Bessie Coleman. To many around her, the dream of flight was ridiculous. To some, it was dangerous. And to nearly everyone, it was impossible. But Bessie refused to let the cage close in. She decided she would fly, no matter what it cost. And when every flight school in America slammed the door in her face, she looked beyond the ocean, to France, the land of daring pilots, the birthplace of aviation stunts, a place where her skin and her gender might not chain her to the ground. There was only one problem. The schools in France didn't speak her language, and if she wanted to fly, she would first have to conquer words before wings. So the question hung heavy in the air. Could the daughter of poor sharecroppers, a black woman from Texas, learn a language she didn't know, cross a world that didn't want her, and claim a sky that tried to stay white? Imagine this. A young woman sitting in a cramped Chicago apartment, her hands stained with polish and dust from a long day of manicuring nails. She looks down at her pay, barely enough to live, but she does not spend it. She saves it. Every dollar, every dime, every cent. Because Bessie Coleman was not saving for comfort. She was saving for wings. Her dream had been lit by stories. Returning soldiers from the First World War spoke of airplanes, machines that defied gravity, that roared above the trenches like thunder. Some of those pilots had been French, men who danced in the clouds, men who lived free in a sky without borders. And Bessie thought, if they can do it, why not me? But America had already given her an answer. No. No flight school would take her. Not as a woman, and certainly not as a black woman. So she set her eyes across the ocean. France, the birthplace of modern aviation. If the sky was closed in America, maybe, just maybe, it would open there. But there was a catch. France did not speak English, and Bessie did not speak French. So imagine her nights. After work, her fingers raw, her back aching, her eyes heavy, she sat at a desk with a French dictionary, repeating words over and over, writing, erasing, writing again, her tongue twisting around unfamiliar sounds. Not for fun, not for school, but because if she didn't learn this language, she would never even touch an airplane. That is ambition. That is fire. And yet, there was something darker chasing her. Even across the Atlantic, she knew racism would follow. It was not an American invention, it was a world disease. But Bessie's determination burned brighter than prejudice. Finally, in 1920, she boarded a ship, alone, carrying nothing but her hope, her savings, and a belief that somewhere, in a foreign land, someone might let her prove herself. Picture the scene. A black woman, the daughter of poor Texas sharecroppers, standing on the deck of an ocean liner. The sea wind in her hair, her eyes locked on the horizon, knowing she was sailing not just to France, but into history. The question was no longer if she would try. It was whether France, the land of soaring pilots and skeptical men, would accept her. Would the country that gave wings to war heroes give wings to Bessie Coleman? Picture this. A field in northern France. The year is 1921. The air is cold, the wind sharp, and on the runway a plane rattles to life. Behind the controls sits a woman the world never expected to see there. Her leather helmet tight, her goggles strapped down, her heart pounding louder than the engine itself. Her name? Bessie Coleman. And on this day, she is about to do what no black woman in history has ever done: earn a pilot's license. Think about that. The daughter of sharecroppers, a former manicurist, a woman who had been told no at every turn, now gripping the stick of an airplane, preparing to lift into history. The ground shakes as the plane begins to roll. Faster, faster, the wheels leave the earth. And suddenly, she is free. Above the trees, above the fields, above the weight of racism, poverty, and every impossible ever thrown in her face. For the first time, Bessie Coleman owns the sky. The license comes days later, official, stamped. The Federation Aeronautic International certifies her, the first black woman pilot in the world. Not in America, not in Texas, in the world. Imagine the euphoria, the rush of knowing you had done what no one believed you could, the rush of breathing in the cold air and realizing the sky no longer belonged only to white men with privilege and money. But the sky is not gentle. The sky is not kind.
The sky demands risk. And Bessie knew it. Because aviation in the 1920s was not commercial airlines and seatbelts. It was flimsy canvas wings, engines that sputtered like angry beasts, planes that could tear apart in midair. And there was no safety net. To make a living, Bessie had to perform. Air shows, stunts, loops, spirals, crowds gasping as she sliced through the clouds, her tiny biplane twisting and falling like a comet. Every performance was a protest. Every spiral a shout against racism. Every dive a declaration of defiance. But behind the cheers, there was always danger. Pilots died often. Engines failed. Wings snapped. Crowds had seen men crash and burn in front of their eyes. And Bessie knew, every time she climbed into that cockpit, it could be her last. But she refused to stop, because she wasn't just flying for herself. She was flying for every black child who had been told they couldn't. She was flying for every woman who had been told to stay in her place. And in those moments, when the crowd fell silent, when the engine roared, when she danced across the sky like lightning, she was untouchable. But the sky is a cruel stage, and for Bessie Coleman, one day the risk she embraced would come true. The year is 1922. A steamship pulls into New York Harbor, and walking down the gangplank is not just a woman, but a pioneer. Bessie Coleman has returned, the first black woman in the world with a pilot's license, a hero abroad. But at home, her country doesn't know what to do with her. Because in Jim Crow America, heroes weren't supposed to look like her. Not black, not female, not defiant. And yet, in the segregated neighborhoods of Chicago, of Harlem, of the South, whispers spread. She did it. One of us broke through the clouds. When Bessie stepped into community halls, crowds gathered. When she took to the air, entire black neighborhoods turned out to see her fly. For them, Bessie wasn't just a pilot. She was proof. Proof that the cage could be broken. But America was still reluctant. White-owned airfields slammed their doors shut. No rentals, no contracts, no stages for her to perform. So what did Bessie do? She built her own stage. She organized air shows on her own terms. If a town wanted her to fly, they had to agree. No segregated seating. Black families sat beside white families, shoulder to shoulder, all gazing upward at the same sky. It was more than entertainment. It was protest. Every loop, every roll, every dive was a challenge to America itself. The danger was real. Pilots crashed. Engines burned. Wings snapped. Crowds had seen men crash and burn in front of their eyes. And still, she climbed back into the cockpit. Because to Bessie, every flight was bigger than her. Every roar of the engine was a shout of defiance against a country that wanted her silent. But the sky is a cruel stage, and for Bessie Coleman, one day, the risk she embraced would come true. The year is 1922. A steamship pulls into New York Harbor, and walking down the gangplank is not just a woman, but a pioneer. Bessie Coleman has returned, the first black woman in the world with a pilot's license, a hero abroad. But at home, her country doesn't know what to do with her. Because in Jim Crow America, heroes weren't supposed to look like her. Not black, not female, not defiant. And yet, in the segregated neighborhoods of Chicago, of Harlem, of the South, whispers spread. She did it. One of us broke through the clouds. When Bessie stepped into community halls, whispers gathered. When she took to the air, entire black neighborhoods turned out to see her fly. For them, Bessie wasn't just a pilot. She was proof. Proof that the cage could be broken. But America was still reluctant. White-owned airfields slammed their doors shut. No rentals, no contracts, no stages for her to perform. So what did Bessie do? She built her own stage. She organized air shows on her own terms. If a town wanted her to fly, they had to agree. No segregated seating. Black families sat beside white families, shoulder to shoulder, all gazing upward at the same sky. It was more than entertainment. It was protest. Every loop, every roll, every dive was a challenge to America itself. The danger was real. Pilots crashed. Engines burned. Wings snapped. Crowds had seen men crash and burn in front of their eyes. And still, she climbed back into the cockpit. Because to Bessie, every flight was bigger than her. Every roar of the engine was a shout of defiance against a country that wanted her silent.
She was becoming a legend, a reluctant hero, not because she sought fame, but because she carried something heavier, the dreams of an entire people. And yet, in her heart, she knew her mission wasn't complete. Bessie didn't want to be the only one. She wanted schools. She wanted training programs. She wanted an entire new generation of black pilots to rise after her. That was the vision. That was the fire that kept her flying. But here is the tragedy. She would never live to see it, because the very skies that had crowned her would one day betray her. Picture this: Jacksonville, Florida, April 30th, 1926. The sun burns hot on a dirt airfield. The smell of gasoline hangs heavy in the air. Crowds gather, buzzing with excitement, waiting for the woman they called Queen Bess. For years, she had defied gravity. For years, she had cheated death. Today, they expected another show. Loops, spirals, dives that made hearts stop, only to climb again into the heavens. But this time, the sky had other plans. Bessie Coleman climbs into the cockpit of an old, borrowed Curtiss Jenny. The leather seat creaks under her weight. She pulls the straps tight across her chest. The engine coughs, sputters, then roars to life. The plane shakes, rattling like an angry beast barely contained. Beside her, William Wills, her mechanic, handles the controls on takeoff. Bessie leans forward, scanning the horizon. Her plan is bold. She wants to parachute from the plane the next day, a stunt that will thrill the crowds and cement her legend. But first, she needs to survey the ground below, mark her jump. The crowd watches as the Jenny climbs higher. The engine growls. The wings strain against the wind. And then, a sudden lurch. The plane jerks violently to the left. Gasps ripple through the spectators. Bessie has no belt holding her inside the open cockpit. She's thrown upward, out, into the sky she loved. For a frozen second, she is suspended against the blue. The woman who defied gravity. The woman who conquered the impossible, floating in silence. And then she falls. The ground rushes up. The crowd screams. Her body hits the earth. Moments later, the plane slams down in a fireball, killing her mechanic instantly. Bessie Coleman was only 34 years old. The airfield falls silent. The dust settles, and for the first time, the sky feels empty. Reflective pause. The woman who defied gravity was betrayed by it. But here is the question that lingers, heavy and unresolved. Was her dream buried with her that day? Or did others dare to pick up the torch she carried? Picture this: a coffin draped in flowers. Thousands gather in Chicago. Men, women, children. Black families who had never seen an airplane, but who had seen Bessie Coleman in their hearts. They came not just to mourn her. They came to honor her, to prove that her dream had not died in Jacksonville. Because the truth is this: Bessie's wings did not fall with her body. They spread, they multiplied, they carried others higher. Fast forward to the 1940s. The war is at war, and in Alabama, a new generation of black pilots is being trained. The Tuskegee Airmen, men who would escort bombers across Europe, earning a reputation so fierce that enemy pilots feared them. But behind every takeoff, behind every formation of gleaming planes, there was Bessie. Her story, her defiance, her proof that the sky could belong to them too. And it wasn't just men. Willa Brown, the first black woman in America to earn both a pilot's license and a commercial license. She trained hundreds of flyers. She fought the same prejudice. But she also carried Bessie's torch. Janet Bragg, a nurse who dreamed of the cockpit. She was turned away again and again because of her race. But she kept fighting. She kept flying. And every time she climbed into her plane, she did so in Bessie's shadow. But here's the tragedy. For decades, history almost erased Bessie Coleman. Her name wasn't in the textbooks. Her face wasn't in the museums. Children learned about Amelia Earhart, but not about Queen Bess. It took activists, historians, communities who refused to forget. They dug up her story. They demanded that schools, libraries, and airfields remember. And slowly, Bessie Coleman's wings returned. Today, when you see a black woman in the cockpit of a passenger jet, when you see a black astronaut strapping into a rocket, when you hear the roar of engines carrying men and women of color into the sky, you are hearing the echo of Bessie Coleman. She didn't live to see the skies desegregated. She didn't live to see the air bases open, the airlines integrate, the dream expand. But without her, they may never have been. Her body fell in Jacksonville, but her wings are still flying. Imagine this: a busy airport, the roar of jet engines, a crowd rushing through terminals. And then a voice crackles over the speaker. This is your captain speaking. A black woman, calm, commanding, guiding a massive aircraft into the sky. Every time that happens, Bessie is there. When a black astronaut straps into a rocket at NASA, staring at the stars she once dreamed of, Bessie is there.
When a black Air Force commander leads squadrons across the globe, Bessie is there. Because her story is not just history, it is present, it is future. But here's the truth. History almost buried her, almost erased her name, almost let the world forget that the first black woman to fly had to cross an ocean to do it. And that's why her story matters today. Because forgetting her would mean forgetting the battles fought before the victories, forgetting the cages that once locked the sky, forgetting the courage it took to break them open. So the next time you see a pilot step into the cockpit, the next time you hear the thunder of engines in the clouds, remember her. Remember the daughter of sharecroppers who refused to bow. Remember the woman who saved pennies to chase a sky that rejected her. Remember the one they tried to silence, but who still speaks through every flight. Every takeoff is a tribute. Every landing is a legacy. Every black pilot who touches the sky is Bessie Coleman's living monument. And if stories like hers move you, don't let them fade again. Share them, carry them, because keeping her memory alive means keeping the door open for the next generation who dares to look up. The sky is no longer closed. The sky belongs to everyone. And in its roar, in its freedom, in its endless horizon, Bessie is still flying.